The longship cut through black waters like a blade through silk. Bjorn Ironside stood at the prow, his weathered hands gripping the carved dragon's head, watching the funeral pyre shrink against the shoreline. The flames consumed what remained of his wife, Thyra, and with her the last ember of warmth in his chest. 3 winters had passed since fever took her, yet the smoke still seemed to fill his lungs. Around him, his crew remained silent, respecting the weight that pressed upon their jarl's shoulders. The wind carried ash across the waves, and Bjorn watched each flake dissolve into the sea, thinking how easily the world erased what once seemed eternal. His hand moved to the silver ring on his finger, Thyra's final gift before the sickness stole her voice. He twisted it once, twice, then pulled it free and held it over the water. For a long moment, it dangled between his fingers, catching the dying light. Then he closed his fist around it and returned it to his hand. "Not yet," he whispered to the wind, "but I swear by Thor's hammer and Odin's eye, no woman will ever hold this heart again. It died with you." The crew heard nothing, but they saw the change in their jarl's stance. Bjorn Ironside had always been formidable, a warrior whose name echoed through every hall from Kattegat to Lindisfarne. But now, something harder replaced the man they knew. Iron had always been his name. Now it became his nature. They sailed through the night, and when dawn broke, Bjorn did not turn to watch it. He kept his eyes on the darkening northern horizon, where new raids awaited, where battle and glory could fill the hollow spaces that love had left behind. Before we continue this journey, subscribe to the channel and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your strength keeps these legends alive. The gods, watching from their high halls, saw the vow Bjorn made, and they smiled, for mortal oaths are the threads from which fate loves to weave her cruelest tapestries. 2 seasons turned, and Bjorn's reputation grew darker and more fearsome. He led his warriors through the bitter waters to the lands of the Franks, where monasteries held gold and kings trembled at the sight of Viking sails. Each raid was executed with precision, each battle won with calculated fury. But his men noticed something troubling. Their jarl fought as if seeking death, yet death refused to claim him. Arrows missed by inches. Swords found only his shield. It was as if the Norns themselves had decided his thread was not yet ready to be cut. In the great hall of Kattegat, where Bjorn returned between campaigns, the atmosphere grew cold. Women who once sought his attention learned to avert their eyes. Even the thralls moved quietly in his presence, sensing the wall of ice that surrounded him. His brother, Hvitserk, tried once to speak of their shared grief, but Bjorn's silence was so complete that the words died in the air between them. "A man who loves nothing is dangerous," the skalds whispered in corners, "but a man who has loved and lost everything is unstoppable and damned." Bjorn sat alone each night, studying maps by candlelight, planning expeditions to places no Northman had yet reached. The Mediterranean called to him with promises of civilizations that knew nothing of Viking fury. Riches waited there, and more importantly, distance from memories that haunted every familiar shore. He gathered his most loyal warriors and outlined his vision. They would sail beyond the pillars where the world was said to end, into waters of legend. Many called it madness. Some called it destiny. None dared call it impossible when Bjorn Ironside declared it would be done. As winter's grip loosened and the ice began to break, Bjorn made his preparations. New ships were built, provisions gathered, alliances formed with jarls hungry for glory. The expedition would be the largest attempted in a generation. 30 longships, over 1,000 warriors, enough to challenge kingdoms. On the night before departure, an old völva came to Bjorn's hall. Her eyes were milky white, her voice like wind through dead trees. She had not been summoned, yet she appeared as if drawn by threads only she could see. "Ironside," she croaked, "the gods have heard your oath. They have seen the chains you wrapped around your heart." Bjorn did not look up from sharpening his axe. "Then they know I am a man of my word. Oaths are easy to make," the völva continued, stepping closer, "but fate has a longer memory than mortal will. You sail toward your destiny, Jarl, but it is not the destiny you imagine. In the land where olives grow and marble gleams white under foreign suns, something waits for you that will test your iron more than any blade ever could. I fear nothing that breathes, Bjorn replied, his voice flat. The Völva's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. That is precisely why you should fear this. For what comes will not break you with steel. It will break you with truth. She left as mysteriously as she had arrived, and Bjorn dismissed her words as the rambling of an old woman seeking attention. He had no room in his heart for riddles or prophecies, only for the cold certainty of his vow. The journey south was brutal. Storms battered the fleet through the straits where the lands nearly touched. They lost 2 ships to the rocks and 70 men to the sea. But Bjorn pressed on with the determination of a man who had already lost everything that mattered. Pain was merely wind against stone. They raided coastal settlements along the way, taking supplies and slaves. The southern lands were soft, their warriors unprepared for the fury of the north. City after city fell, and Bjorn's reputation spread like wildfire through the Mediterranean kingdoms. They called him the Iron Demon, the Soulless One, the Northern Scourge. In the 5th month of their campaign, they reached a city built on white cliffs overlooking turquoise waters. Its walls were ancient, its wealth legendary. Bjorn's scouts reported light defenses. The city relied on its remote location and treacherous approaches for protection. They had never faced Vikings. The assault came at dawn. Bjorn led the charge himself, his axe singing through the air as the gates splintered. Resistance was minimal. Within hours, the city was theirs. His warriors spread through the streets, claiming treasure and captives according to custom. Bjorn walked through the conquered city alone, his bloodied axe resting on his shoulder. The architecture fascinated him, columns carved with impossible precision, mosaics depicting gods he did not recognize, fountains that whispered with mountain water. This was a world so different from his frozen homeland that it might as well have been another realm entirely. In the city's central square, near a temple with marble steps, his attention was drawn to a commotion. 3 of his warriors had cornered a group of women, and though the scene was common after conquest, something made Bjorn approach. One woman stood between his men and the others, a blade in her hand, despite the obvious futility. She was young, perhaps 20, summers, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and eyes the color of bronze in firelight. Blood ran from a cut on her arm, but her stance never wavered. She spoke in a language Bjorn did not understand, but the meaning was clear. She would die before surrendering. Enough, Bjorn commanded in his own tongue. His warriors stepped back immediately, recognizing their Jarl's voice. The woman's eyes met his, and something passed between them. Not recognition, but a kind of mutual acknowledgement. She saw not a demon, but a man. He saw not prey, but a warrior. For 3 heartbeats, the world seemed too still. Then one of his men spoke in broken Greek, which the woman understood. "The Ironside claims you. You come with us." She lowered her blade slowly, understanding that continued resistance would only result in the deaths of those she protected. Her eyes never left Bjorn's face as she nodded once, a gesture of defiance and dignity combined. On the ship, she remained silent. While other captives wept or pleaded, she sat with her back straight, watching the city disappear behind them. Bjorn found himself observing her from the steering platform, noting the way she comforted the younger women without words, how she rationed her water to share with others. "What is her name?" he asked the interpreter that evening. "She says her name is Sophia. It means wisdom in her language." "And what was she?" "A healer, Lord. She worked in the temple, tending to the sick and wounded." Bjorn nodded and said nothing more. But that night, when sleep eluded him as it always did, he found his thoughts returning to bronze eyes that held no fear, only a strength that mirrored something he had thought dead within himself. The fleet continued their raids along the coast, but as summer peaked, Bjorn made the decision to establish a temporary settlement on a sheltered island. His warriors needed rest, the ships required repairs, and the accumulated treasure needed to be organized before the journey home. The camp grew into something resembling a small town. tents gave way to wooden structures. The captives were put to work, though Bjorn issued strict orders against unnecessary cruelty. He had seen enough suffering. He had no taste for adding to it without purpose. Sophia was assigned to tend the wounded, a role that suited her skills and kept her under closer watch. Bjorn observed her work from a distance, noting her competence and the way even hardened warriors softened slightly under her care. She learned Norse words quickly, though she spoke rarely and never to him directly. One evening, a young warrior was brought to her with a festering wound from a blade that had been left uncleaned. The infection had spread, and fever raged through him. Bjorn's healers had given up, preparing the boy for his journey to Valhalla. Sophia examined the wound with careful hands, then looked up at Bjorn, who stood nearby. She spoke in halting Norse. "I can maybe help, but need things. Plants from forest." "It's nearly dark," one of Bjorn's men objected. "The forest is dangerous at night." "Then she goes with guards," Bjorn said. "Get her what she needs." He assigned 4 warriors to accompany her, but at the last moment, something made him follow as well. He told himself it was simply to ensure his property was protected, but even he did not fully believe the lie. Sophia moved through the darkening forest with surprising confidence, identifying plants by touch and scent. She gathered roots, leaves, and bark with the precision of someone who had done this countless times. Bjorn watched her work, fascinated despite himself. "You are not afraid," he observed in Norse, knowing she would understand at least the sentiment, if not every word. She paused, looking at him directly for only the second time since her capture. "Afraid of you, or afraid of a forest?" "Either. Both." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, bitter and knowing. "Fear is luxury, cannot afford." They returned to camp in silence. Sophia worked through the night preparing poultices and bitter draughts. By dawn, the young warrior's fever had broken. By the second day, the wound began to heal cleanly. Bjorn's men looked at her with new respect, whispering that she possessed magic or the favor of unknown gods. But Bjorn knew better. What she possessed was knowledge, skill, and the kind of determination that came from facing impossible odds and refusing to break. He recognized it because he saw it in his own reflection each morning. Days turned into weeks. The settlement thrived under Bjorn's leadership, becoming a true Viking outpost in foreign lands. Trade routes were established with nearby settlements desperate to avoid being raided. Sophia's status shifted from captive to something more ambiguous. Not free, but no longer merely property. She began teaching some of the Norse words of Greek, facilitating trade and diplomacy. In turn, she learned their language with remarkable speed. Conversations between her and Bjorn grew longer, though they remained careful, 2 people circling each other like wolves, uncertain whether to fight or ally. One night, unable to sleep, Bjorn found her sitting by the shore, staring at the stars. Without asking permission, he sat nearby, close enough to speak, but far enough to maintain distance. "You watch the sky." "Often," he observed. "Same stars," she replied softly. "Here, home, same sky. Makes distance feel less." "Do you hate me?" The question surprised him as much as it did her. He had not meant to ask it. Sophia was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight of considered truth. "Hate is also luxury. You take city, kill some, take others. This is way of world. You could be worse, you could be better. You are what you are. And what am I?" She turned to look at him, and in the starlight her eyes were unfathomable. "Man who thinks he is iron, but iron rusts when forget to care for it. Iron breaks when hit right way. You are not iron, you are man pretending to be." The words should have angered him. Instead, they struck something deep, a cord he had thought severed. He stood abruptly and walked away without responding, but the conversation echoed in his mind for days afterward. As autumn approached, Bjorn knew they would need to begin the journey home soon. The seas would grow treacherous, and his warriors were eager to return to their families with their wealth and glory. Yet he found himself reluctant in ways he could not fully explain. The settlement had become something more than a temporary camp. Some of his men had taken southern women as wives, Children played in the streets. Fields had been planted. It was beginning to resemble not a Viking outpost, but a true colony, a bridge between two worlds. Sophia had become essential to the community. Her healing skills saved lives regularly, and her ability to communicate with both Norse and Greek speakers made her invaluable. But more than this, she had earned a kind of respect that transcended her status. Even the most hardened warriors sought her counsel on matters beyond medicine. Bjorn found reasons to speak with her more frequently. He told himself it was practical. She understood the local politics. She could advise on trade. She knew which settlements might welcome negotiation over conflict. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. Her presence had become the only thing that quieted the constant roar of emptiness in his chest. They spoke of their worlds, she of philosophers and democracy, of theatre and mathematics, of gods who were flawed and all too human, he of honor and courage, of the glory of dying in battle, of a cosmos where fate was, woven by ancient sisters who cared nothing for mortal wishes. "Your gods sound tired," she observed one evening. "Always fighting, always scheming, never rest." "They reflect the world as it is," Bjorn replied. "Struggle is the only truth. My people believe something different," Sophia said. "They believe that highest truth is knowledge, understanding, that wisdom brings peace. Has wisdom brought peace to your city, to your people who now serve mine?" The barb landed, and regret flickered through Bjorn immediately. But Sophia's expression remained calm. "No," she admitted, "but neither has your strength brought you peace. You have everything man could want: wealth, power, fear of enemies, love of warriors. Yet you sit here in darkness, looking at nothing, wanting what? What does Ironside want that he does not have?" The question hung between them like a sword on a thread. Bjorn had no answer that would not expose the wound he kept hidden. "I want nothing," he finally said. "That is the point." "That," Sophia replied softly, "is saddest thing I ever hear. As fate turns against our hero, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Let's see how far. These voices can travel. The next day, a messenger arrived from a nearby kingdom. A coalition of southern lords had gathered, determined to drive the Vikings from their lands. An army was marching toward them, 10,000 men with cavalry and siege equipment. The time for peace was ending. Bjorn called his war council. The numbers were against them, but retreat felt like defeat. Some argued for abandoning the settlement and taking to the ships. Others wanted to fight, claiming the gods would grant victory to the brave. During the debate, Sophia entered the hall uninvited, a breach of protocol that silenced the room. She walked directly to Bjorn and spoke in front of everyone. "I can help," she said in clear Norse. "I know these lands. I know their leaders. Let me go speak with them. Maybe prevent bloodshed." "You would betray us?" one of Bjorn's captains demanded. "I betray no one," Sophia replied. "But I also do not want to watch more death, yours or theirs. There is another way, always another way, if people brave enough to look." Bjorn studied her face, searching for deception. He found only the same quiet strength that had first caught his attention in the conquered city months ago. "No," he said finally. "If there is to be negotiation, I will do it myself. I do not send others to face dangers I will not face." Something shifted in Sophia's expression, surprise perhaps, or a glimmer of respect she had not expected to feel. "Then I come with you," she said. "You need translator. You need someone who understands their ways, and maybe you need someone who believes peace is possible, because I do not think you do." Bjorn should have refused. Every tactical instinct told him to keep her as leverage, to maintain the upper hand. But he found himself nodding. "At dawn," he said, "we ride under white banner. Tell your gods to pray we return." "Your gods too," Sophia replied. "We need all help we can get." The parley took place in a neutral valley, surrounded by witnesses from both sides. Bjorn brought 20 warriors as escort, while the southern coalition arrived with twice that number. The tension was thick as smoke. The coalition's leader was a lord named Alexandros, a man with grey in his beard and cunning in his eyes. He spoke through Sophia, who translated with perfect accuracy, adding nothing, removing nothing. The negotiations were tense. Alexandros demanded the Vikings leave and pay tribute for their crimes. Bjorn countered with offers of trade agreements and peace treaties. Back and forth, they tested each other, seeking advantage. It was during a pause in the talks that Alexandros noticed how Bjorn's eyes occasionally flickered to Sophia, and how she maintained a careful neutrality that spoke of inner conflict. "The woman," Alexandros said suddenly, "she is your captive." "She is under my protection," Bjorn replied, a subtle but significant distinction. "I will offer you a trade," Alexandros proposed. "Release all our people you have taken, including her, and we will let you leave in peace with your ships and treasure. You can sail home with your wealth and your lives. Refuse, and we will bury you here, so far from your frozen halls that your gods will never find you." Bjorn's warriors shifted, hands moving to weapons. But Bjorn remained still, his face unreadable. "And if I refuse your generous offer? Then we fight. You are outnumbered. You will lose. Your death will be meaningless, your name forgotten in these lands. Is that the legacy you want? To die in a place that will never remember you?" It was a well-crafted trap. Accept, and he appeared weak, buying his life with surrender. Refuse, and he led his men to almost certain death. Either way, he lost something essential. Sophia, translating, kept her voice steady, but Bjorn saw something in her eyes. Fear, perhaps, or hope. She stood between two worlds, waiting to see which would claim her. For the first time since Thyra's death, Bjorn felt something break inside him. Not the expected crack of weakness, but something more profound, the sudden recognition that the iron he had wrapped around his heart was not strength, but cowardice. He had sworn never to love again, not from honor, but from fear. Fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of being human. Looking at Sophia, who had shown more courage as a captive than he had shown as a conqueror, Bjorn understood what the Völva had meant. The test was not of strength, but of truth. "I will give you my answer at dawn," Bjorn said. "We will camp separately tonight and meet here when the sun rises." Alexandros looked disappointed. He had hoped to force an immediate decision, but agreed. Both parties withdrew. That night, Bjorn sat alone in his tent, staring at the silver ring on his finger. Thyra's voice seemed to whisper in the darkness, not with words, but with the memory of everything she had been. Her laughter, her wisdom, her insistence that strength without compassion was just cruelty wearing a crown. "You would tell me I am a fool," he said to the empty air. "You would say that love is not betrayal of your memory. You would remind me that you made me promise to live, not merely survive." The ring caught the firelight, glinting like a distant star. Outside, he heard movement. Sophia appeared at the tent entrance, neither invited nor turned away. "I should not be here," she said, "but I think you need to hear something." "Speak, then." She stepped closer, and in the flickering light she looked both young and ancient, a woman who had seen enough of life to understand its essential truths. "Tomorrow you choose," she said quietly. "You think choice is about me, about captives, about peace or war, but real choice is different, is about whether you let fear rule you or whether you remember what it means to be alive." "You know nothing of what I have lost," Bjorn said, but there was no heat in his words. "I know everything," Sophia replied. "I see it in your eyes every day. You loved someone. She died. You decided to die too, but your body forgot to stop breathing. So you become iron, become storm, become anything except man who feels. But Bjorn," she used his name for the first time, "you are still here, and being here means something. Means you have choice. Choice to stay frozen or choice to thaw. And if thawing means pain, more loss, then you feel pain. Then you risk loss. This is price of being alive." She moved closer still, close enough that he could see tears in her bronze eyes. "You think you honor her. Memory by refusing to feel? You dishonor it. You waste the life she would want you to live." The words broke something final in Bjorn, not his strength, but the prison he had built around it. A sound escaped him, raw and ancient, grief finally allowed to breathe. Sophia did not move away. She stood, witness to his breaking, understanding that sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is allow themselves to shatter so they can be remade. When dawn came, Bjorn rode back to the parley site with Sophia beside him. Alexandros waited with his warriors, expecting either surrender or battle. "I have decided," Bjorn announced. "I will release all captives who wish to return home. I will pay tribute for damages done, and I will establish a permanent peace between our peoples, sealed with trade and mutual respect." His own warriors looked shocked. Some appeared betrayed, but Bjorn continued. "However," he said, looking at Sophia, "I will ask each person individually whether they wish to return or stay. The choice is theirs alone. I will not force anyone to leave or remain." It was not the answer Alexandros expected, but it was one he could accept. Over the next hour, captives were brought forward one by one. Most chose to return home. Tears and reunions followed, but some, who had found new lives or formed bonds, chose to stay. When Sophia's turn came, the valley fell silent. Every eye watched as she stood between Bjorn and Alexandros, between two worlds, two futures, two versions of herself. "What is your choice?" Alexandros asked in Greek. Sophia looked at him, then at Bjorn. Her voice was clear when she spoke in Norse, so everyone present could understand. "I choose to stay, not as captive, not as property, but as free woman who makes own choice." Then, switching to Greek, so Alexandros would understand, "I choose to stay because I have found something here worth more than returning to what was. I have found purpose, and perhaps I have found man who needs to remember how to be human." The peace treaty was signed in blood and witnessed by the gods of both peoples. Bjorn's settlement transformed from a warrior camp into a true colony where Norse and Greek cultures intertwined. Trade flourished. Families grew. What had begun as conquest evolved into something unprecedented, a place where old enemies learned to become neighbors. But peace brought its own challenges. Not all of Bjorn's warriors accepted the new arrangement. A faction led by a fierce captain named Ragnar Bloodaxe believed their jarl had been bewitched, that he had betrayed the warrior's path for the weakness of compromise. The discontent festered through winter. Ragnar and his followers spoke of returning to the old ways, of taking what they wanted by force. They watched Bjorn and Sophia with barely concealed contempt, seeing their growing closeness as evidence of corruption. Bjorn felt the tension, but did not act immediately. He was navigating unfamiliar territory, not just politically but emotionally. His feelings for Sophia had grown beyond what he could ignore or deny, yet the ghost of his vow haunted him. To love again felt like betrayal, even as every conversation with her reminded him of what it meant to truly live. Sophia, for her part, maintained a careful distance. She had chosen to stay, but she understood the complexity of Bjorn's internal war. She gave him space while remaining present, a delicate balance that spoke to her wisdom. One evening during a feast celebrating the winter solstice, Ragnar Bloodaxe made his move. He stood before the gathered crowd and challenged Bjorn's leadership directly. "Our jarl has gone soft," Ragnar declared, his voice carrying across the hall. "He trades his axe for olive branches. He seeks approval from southern weaklings. He breaks bread with those we should conquer. And why? Because a foreign woman has bewitched him with her healing hands and honeyed words." The hall erupted in chaos, some supporting Ragnar, others defending Bjorn. Sophia remained seated, her face calm despite the venom directed at her. Bjorn stood slowly, and the force of his presence quieted the room. "You speak of strength, Ragnar," Bjorn said, his voice cold and clear. "But you confuse strength with stubbornness. You mistake brutality for courage. You think that because I choose peace, I have forgotten war. Shall I remind you?" Ragnar's hand moved to his weapon. "I challenge you, Ironside, right here, before these witnesses. If you still have the strength to lead, prove it." It was a formal challenge, witnessed by all. Bjorn could not refuse without losing face completely, but he also understood that this was about more than personal combat. It was about the future of everything he had built. "I accept," Bjorn said, But we fight not to death. First blood. The winner leads, the loser follows or leaves in peace. Agreed? Ragnar had hoped for a fight to the death, but he couldn't back down. Agreed. They fought in the center of the hall, weapons ringing against each other in the firelight. Ragnar was younger, faster, fueled by rage and ambition. But Bjorn was Bjorn Ironside, a warrior whose name carried weight for good reason. Experience and skill counted for more than youth and fury. The fight was brutal but brief. Within moments, Bjorn had disarmed Ragnar and held a blade to his throat. A thin line of blood appeared where the edge pressed against skin. First blood, Bjorn declared. You will follow or you will leave. Choose now. Ragnar's eyes blazed with humiliation, but he had no choice. I will leave, and I will not return. Then go with my blessing and no enmity between us, Bjorn said, surprising everyone by helping Ragnar to his feet. You fought with honor. You deserve to leave with it. A dozen warriors joined Ragnar in departing, good men who simply could not accept the new path. Bjorn let them take a ship and supplies enough for their journey. He bore them no grudge for their choice, just as he hoped they would eventually understand his. After they sailed, Bjorn stood on the shore with Sophia beside him. You could have killed him, she observed. I could have killed many people, Bjorn replied. Death is easy, living is harder. You learn, she said with a slight smile. I had a good teacher. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings neither had fully spoken. But Bjorn still wore Thera's ring, and Sophia still maintained her careful distance. Some bridges take time to build. Spring brought new challenges. Messengers arrived from Kattegat, carrying news that shook Bjorn to his core. His mother, the legendary Lagertha, was ill. The healers believed she had perhaps 1 year left, maybe less. She wished to see her son before the end. Bjorn faced an impossible choice. His place was in the settlement, holding together this fragile new peace. But his duty was to his mother, to family, to the bonds that defined him. To abandon either felt like betraying himself. Sophia found him pacing the walls at midnight, wrestling with the decision. You must go, she said simply. Family is everything. She gave you life. You must be there at her death. And what of this place? What of the peace we have built? Peace that depends on one person is not true peace, Sophia replied. You have built something good here, but you have also taught people to lead themselves. Trust that. Come with me, Bjorn said suddenly. The words surprising him as much as her. Come north, see my homeland, meet my people. Sophia's breath caught. The invitation was more significant than he perhaps realized. Bringing her to his home meant introducing her to his life, his history, his truth. Is long journey, she said carefully. It is, and dangerous. And the land is nothing like this, cold and harsh and unforgiving. But he struggled for words. I would have you see where I come from. Who I was before all of this, before you became Ironside, before I forgot I was also just Bjorn. The vulnerability in his voice decided her. Then I come, if you sure this is what you want. They departed within the week, leaving the settlement in the hands of capable leaders from both Norse and Greek communities. The journey north was as brutal as promised. Storm-tossed seas and bitter winds that seemed determined to turn them back. But they persevered. Kattegat appeared on the horizon like a memory made solid. Wooden buildings clustered around the harbour, smoke rising from 100 hearths, ships bobbing in familiar waters. Bjorn had not realized how much he missed it until he saw it again. His arrival caused a sensation. Bjorn Ironside returning from the Mediterranean with tales of glory and gold, with a foreign woman at his side, with stories that seemed too incredible to be true. The great hall filled to overflowing that first night as warriors and families gathered to hear his saga. But beneath the celebration, Bjorn's heart was heavy. His mother lay in her chamber too weak to attend the feast. He excused himself and went to her, leaving Sophia in the care of his trusted friends. Lagertha had always been formidable, a shield maiden whose reputation eclipsed even her famous sons in some tales. Now she lay small and frail, her warrior's strength eaten away by sickness, yet her eyes remained sharp and her spirit unbroken. My son, she whispered as he knelt beside her bed. You came. Of course I came, Bjorn replied, taking her hand. Did you think I would not? I know the pull of the sea, the call of adventure. I would not have blamed you for staying away. They spoke through the night, of his journey, of the settlement, of the life he had built in the south. Lagertha listened with interest, asking questions that revealed her tactical mind still functioned perfectly. Finally, she asked the question Bjorn had been dreading. And the woman you brought with you? Who is she? Bjorn hesitated. Her name is Sophia. She was a captive, then a healer, and now I do not know what she is, except important. Lagertha's lips curved in a knowing smile. You love her. I made a vow. You made a vow born of grief. Lagertha interrupted with surprising strength. I knew Thyra. She was my daughter by choice, if not by blood, and I know she would strike you with her own hand if she heard you using her memory as a shield against life. I feel like I am betraying her. You would betray her by wasting the years she cannot have, Lagertha said. Love is not a betrayal of love. It is proof that what you shared was real and strong enough to teach you how to love again. Do you think Thyra would want you frozen forever? No, Bjorn admitted, but knowing what I should feel and feeling it are different things. Then let me tell you a secret, Lagertha said, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. The heart is not like gold. It does not run out when you share it. I loved your father, and when he died, I thought I would never love again, but I did. And each love was different, each love was true, and none diminished the others. You honor Thyra not by refusing to love, but by loving so well that you prove she taught you how. Tears streamed down Bjorn's weathered face. I am afraid, mother, afraid that if I love again, I will lose again, and I do not know if I can survive that twice. You survived it once, Lagertha said, wiping his tears with a trembling hand. That means you are stronger than you know, and the woman who waits in that hall, she is strong too. I can see it in how she carries herself. She is not Thyra, and that is good. She is Sophia. Let her be herself, and let yourself be the man who can love her. But my vow, your vow was made by a man drowning in grief. You are no longer drowning. You can choose to honor a promise made in darkness, or you can choose to honor the light that brought you out of it. The gods do not punish men for choosing life over death, my son. They punish men for choosing nothing at all. Lagertha's words settled into Bjorn's heart like seeds in fertile soil. He stayed with her until dawn, and when he finally left her chamber, something within him had shifted, not broken, but transformed. The weeks that followed were bittersweet. Lagertha rallied slightly, enjoying her final days, surrounded by family and friends. She insisted on meeting Sophia properly, and the two women spent hours together, speaking through interpreters and gestures, finding understanding beyond words. One afternoon, Bjorn found them sitting together by the hearth, laughing at something he could not hear. The sight struck him with profound emotion. His mother, near death, and the woman who had brought him back to life, sharing joy as if they had known each other for years. Your mother is a remarkable woman, Sophia told him that evening as they walked along the shore. She has, how you say, fire inside. Even now, when body fails, spirit burns bright. She has always been that way, Bjorn replied. I think sometimes the gods made her from storm and steel, not flesh and blood. They walked in comfortable silence, the sound of waves against rocks providing rhythm to their thoughts. Finally, Bjorn stopped and turned to face her. Sophia, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I need to tell you something, not as Jarl to subject, not as captor to captive, but as man to woman. She waited, bronze eyes, reflecting the setting sun. When I took you from that city, I was already dead inside. I told myself I felt nothing, wanted nothing, needed nothing. I wore my grief like armor and my oath like a shield. But you, he struggled for words, you reminded me that being alive is not the same as living. That feeling pain means feeling joy. That opening yourself to loss is the price of experiencing love. Bjorn, "Let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I have spent these months fighting what I feel, telling myself it would betray Thyra's memory, but my mother helped me understand. Loving you does not diminish what I shared with Thyra. It proves that what she taught me about love was real and lasting." He took Sophia's hands in his, feeling them tremble slightly. "I cannot promise you safety. I cannot promise you ease. My life is one of voyages and battles, of politics and danger, but I can promise you this. If you would have me, I would love you with everything I am, not as replacement for what I lost, but as celebration of what I have found." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "You know I am not like her. I am from different world, different gods, different ways. I know, and that is, I know, and part of why I love you. You are not her shadow. You are your own light, and I do not want you to be anything other than exactly who you are. What of your people? They will say I bewitched you. They will say I am not worthy." "My people will say many things," Bjorn replied with a slight smile. "They always do. But I stopped living for their approval when I decided to live for myself. The question is not what they think. The question is, what do you want?" Sophia looked at him for a long moment, and in her eyes he saw the same careful consideration she brought to everything. She was not a woman, who made decisions lightly or spoke words she did not mean. She began slowly, "I want to see where this path leads. I want to know what it means when iron learns to bend instead of break. I want to build something with you. Not empire, not conquest, but life. True life, with all its risks and rewards." Bjorn reached for the silver ring on his finger, Thyra's ring, which he had worn for 3 years as both memorial and prison. Slowly, with reverence, he removed it and held it in his palm. "This was hers," he said quietly, "and it will always be precious to me, but I cannot wear it forever and still move forward. I will keep it, treasure it, remember her through it, but I will not let it chain me to the past." He took a leather cord from around his neck and threaded the ring onto it, placing it over his heart, where it could rest close, but no longer bind. "I do not have a ring to offer you," he continued. "Not yet, but I offer you this, my truth, my heart, and my promise to be worthy of yours." Sophia stepped forward and placed her hand over his chest, feeling the ring beneath the leather, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. "I do not need ring," she said. "I need only this, to know that when you look at me, you see me, not ghost, not replacement, just Sophia." "Just Sophia," Bjorn agreed, "who is more than enough." They kissed then, as the sun set over Kattegat, and the gods looked down with approval or amusement. It was hard to tell which. But for once, Bjorn did not care what the gods thought. He cared only about the woman in his arms and the future they would build together. Lagertha died 3 weeks later, peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by those who loved her. The funeral was magnificent. Warriors came from across the north to honor the legendary Shield Maiden. Her pyre burned so bright it seemed to challenge the sun itself, and the songs sung in her honor would echo through the halls of Valhalla. Bjorn grieved, but this grief was different from what he had felt when Thyra died. This was clean grief, honest grief, the natural sorrow of losing someone beloved, without the added weight of guilt or unfinished business. Sophia stood beside him throughout the ceremonies, offering silent support that meant more than any words could. After the funeral, Bjorn made an announcement that shocked many. He would be dividing his time between Kattegat and the Mediterranean settlement. His younger brother would govern the north in his absence, while he built something new in the south, a true colony that would serve as bridge between cultures. "Some will call this abandonment," Bjorn declared before the assembled jarls and warriors. "They will say I turn my back on my homeland, but I say I am expanding it. I am taking what we are and sharing it with the world, while bringing the world back to enrich what we are." My mother taught me that a warrior's strength is not measured only in conquest, but in what she builds that outlasts her. I intend to build something worthy of her legacy. Not everyone approved, but none could deny that Bjorn Ironside had earned the right to forge his own path. He had brought back more wealth than any raid in memory, established trade routes that would benefit Kattegat for generations, and proven his courage countless times. As spring arrived, Bjorn and Sophia prepared to return south. The night before their departure, Bjorn visited his mother's grave one final time. He knelt in the cold earth and spoke to her spirit. "I hope I make you proud, Mother. I'm trying to honor what you taught me to be strong but not cruel, to be fierce but not heartless, to lead but not dominate. Sophia helps me remember these things when the old ways call to me. She is—" He paused, searching for words. "She is my compass when the seas grow dark." The wind stirred, and in its whisper Bjorn could almost hear Lagertha's voice. "Live well, my son. That is all any warrior can hope for." The journey south was easier than before. The trade routes were established now, and Bjorn's name ensured safe passage through territories that once would have been hostile. When they finally reached the settlement, they were greeted with celebration. The colony had not just survived, but thrived in their absence. Bjorn and Sophia worked together to strengthen what they had built. She established a true healing house, training both Norse and Greek students in medicine. He expanded the harbor and fortifications, ensuring the settlement could withstand threats while remaining open to trade. One evening, as they sat watching the sun set over the Mediterranean, Sophia placed a hand on her belly, a gesture so subtle Bjorn almost missed it. "I need tell you something," she said quietly. Bjorn looked at her, and in her eyes he saw joy mixed with apprehension. "I am with child, your child." The world seemed to stop. Bjorn's breath caught, and 1,000 emotions flooded through him. Fear, joy, terror, love, all tangled together in a knot he could not untangle. "Are you certain?" he managed to ask. "Yes, 2 months now, maybe more. I wanted to be sure before I tell you." Bjorn stood and walked to the edge of the terrace, his hands gripping the stone railing. A child, new life, the ultimate statement of faith in the future, but also another chance for loss. Another opportunity for the gods to remind him of his mortality. Sophia came to stand beside him, waiting patiently for his response. "I am afraid," Bjorn admitted finally. "Afraid I will lose you. Afraid I will lose the child. Afraid I will fail as father. Afraid I will somehow destroy this happiness because I do not deserve it." "Fear is normal," Sophia said. "I'm afraid too. But fear means we understand what precious gift this is. Fear means we will protect it with everything we are. What if I am not enough? What if—" Sophia turned him to face her, her hands firm on his arms. "Bjorn Ironside, you sailed to edge of known world. You conquered cities. You made peace where was only war. You learned to love again when you thought your heart was dead. You are enough. You have always been enough. Stop listening to your fear and start listening to your strength." Her words broke through his panic, and suddenly Bjorn was laughing, great full-bodied laughter that seemed to shake loose all the terror and replace it with pure, uncomplicated joy. "A child," he said, pulling Sophia into his arms. "We are going to have a child." "We are," she confirmed, laughing with him. "So, you better start building bigger house. And learning to be gentle, and maybe sleeping more than 4 hours each night." "I can do those things," Bjorn said. "For you, for our child, for the life we are building together." They stood there, holding each other as the sun disappeared and stars emerged, the same stars that had watched over both. Their peoples, since time began, now witnessing the joining of 2 worlds in the promise of new life. The child was born in winter, a daughter with her mother's dark hair and her father's fierce blue eyes. They named her Astrid, which meant beautiful goddess in Norse, and Thea, which meant divine in Greek. She would carry both worlds in her name, as she would carry both worlds in her blood. Bjorn held his daughter for the first time with trembling hands, marveling at how something so small could weigh so much. Every fear he had carried about fatherhood melted away the moment she wrapped her tiny fingers around his calloused thumb. "She is perfect," he whispered to Sophia, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. "She is ours," Sophia replied. "That makes her more than perfect." The settlement celebrated the birth as they would celebrate a new beginning, because that's what Astrid, Thea, represented. She was living proof that different worlds could not only coexist, but create something entirely new. Children of both Norse and Greek descent played together in the streets, growing up speaking both languages, honoring both sets of gods, building a future that transcended the divisions of the past. Years passed. The settlement grew into a true city, Bjornsby some called it, though Sophia preferred the Greek name Sophiopolis. It became a center of trade and learning, where warriors and philosophers shared mead and debated the nature of courage, where Viking shipbuilders learned Mediterranean techniques and Greek scholars studied Norse sagas. Bjorn's reputation transformed. He was no longer just Bjorn Ironside the Conqueror. He became Bjorn the Builder, Bjorn the Peacemaker, Bjorn who united worlds. Yet he never forgot what had brought him to this place, the grief that had nearly destroyed him, the woman who had reminded him how to live, the choice to let iron bend rather than break. On Astrid's 5th birthday, the family traveled back to Kattegat. Bjorn wanted his daughter to know her Norse heritage, to see the graves of her grandparents, to understand where half of her story began. Standing at Lagerta's grave, Bjorn held Astrid on his shoulders while Sophia stood beside them. "This was your grandmother," Bjorn told his daughter. "She was the fiercest warrior I ever knew, and she taught me that true strength is not refusing to feel. It is feeling everything and moving forward anyway." "Was she brave?" Astrid asked in her child's voice that mixed Norse and Greek words without distinction. "The bravest," Bjorn confirmed. "But do you know what her greatest act of bravery was?" "Fighting a dragon," Astrid guessed, imagination already running. "Wild," Bjorn laughed. "No, her greatest bravery was teaching me that it is okay to change, that becoming something new does not mean betraying what you were, that iron can learn to bend without losing its strength." He looked at Sophia, who smiled at him with the same bronze eyes that had first caught his attention in a conquered city years ago. Those eyes that had seen through his armor to the wounded man beneath. Those eyes that had shown him the path back to being human. Later that evening, as they sat in the great hall where Bjorn had once feasted as a young warrior, an old skald approached and asked permission to sing a new saga. Bjorn granted it, curious what tale the old man would tell. The skald's voice rose clear and strong. "Hear now the tale of Bjorn called Ironside, who sailed to the edge where the old world died. He swore by the gods and the storm-torn sky that love was dead and his heart would die. But fate is woven by hands unknown, and iron breaks when it stands alone. In southern lands where olive trees grow, he found a woman whose strength would show that iron bends but does not break, that closed hearts can learn to wake, that grief, though deep, need not define the man who walks between the divine. So raise your horns to Bjorn the Wise, who learned that love never truly dies. It transforms, renews, and finds new form, like spring that follows the winter storm." The hall erupted in approval, warriors pounding tables and shouting praise. But Bjorn barely heard them. He was looking at Sophia and Astrid, at the life they had built together from the ruins of grief and the courage to try again. If this journey moved you, leave a like, subscribe, and share in the comments what touched you the most. Your voice keeps these legends alive. That night, as Bjorn lay in bed with Sophia beside him and Astrid asleep in the next room, He took out Thera's ring, still worn on a leather cord around his neck, close to his heart, but no longer a chain. "Thank you," he whispered to her memory, "for loving me enough to teach me how to love, for giving me the strength to survive losing you, and for whatever part of you watches now, thank you for approving of what I have become." Sophia stirred beside him, not quite awake. "Talking to ghosts again," she murmured. "Just making peace with the past," Bjorn replied, tucking the ring back beneath his shirt. "Good," Sophia said, snuggling closer, "because present needs you, and so does future." Bjorn wrapped his arms around her, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing, the warmth of her body, the absolute reality of this moment. He thought of the vow he had made all those years ago, never to love another woman. How certain he had been, how wrong. He had learned that the strongest iron is not the iron that never bends, it is the iron that bends and returns to true. He had learned that love is not a betrayal of love, but a testament to it. He had learned that honoring the dead means living, fully, not dying slowly. The northern wind still howled outside, as it always had and always would, but inside there was warmth. Inside there was life. Inside there was a man who had been forged in grief, tempered in loss, and finally transformed by the courage to love again. Bjorn Ironside had sworn he would never love another woman, but a stranger from a conquered city had changed his fate forever, not by breaking his vow, but by showing him that some promises are meant to be outgrown, that becoming more than you were is not betrayal, but evolution, that the greatest warriors are not those who cannot be wounded, but those who heal and fight again. As sleep finally claimed him, Bjorn's last thought was simple and profound. He had spent years being Ironside, but perhaps his greatest achievement was learning to be Bjorn again, just a man, loving and loved, living and alive, building a legacy not of conquest but of connection. The gods, watching from their high halls, nodded in approval. They had tested him with loss and tempted him with isolation, but Bjorn Ironside had passed the truest test. He had chosen life over death, love over fear, becoming over being. And in the end, that is the only victory that truly matters. This story reminds us that the strongest among us are not those who never break, but those who break and choose to rebuild. That honoring our past does not mean being imprisoned by it, and that love, true love, is not a finite resource. It is a renewable flame that grows brighter with each person we allow to kindle it. The real courage is not in refusing to feel pain, but in feeling it fully and choosing joy anyway.